What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Primetime Sports Podcast, hosted by Joey McLaury. So today is a Friday evening, 6 o'clock. I'm live here in the WZBC studio. Great to be back in here. I took a few days off from the podcast, but it was great to be back over the last week, doing a lot more, talking a lot more sports. I feel like maybe during the day is probably my best time to try to talk sports, and at night I have classes and stuff like that. So it seems like the best time to talk sports is during the day, so I took advantage of that over the last week, and hopefully I'm going to do this more over the next few weeks and the next few months. It's something I definitely miss doing, is talking sports. It's something I've done my whole life, and the podcast was something that was a big part of my life for a couple years, but once I started the job here at BC, it was really tough to balance school and work with obviously a podcast too, and other things, so it just seemed like it was a good time to take a little bit of a break, and now I'm back at it doing it again. So in this episode, it's going to be very quick, probably about 10 to 15 minutes. Going to be heading to the BC hockey game at 7 o'clock against Merrimack. So I won't be able to do this episode for too long, probably about 15 to 20 minutes. Going to talk some NFL football. I wanted to talk some college football and talk about Notre Dame winning last night over Penn State, which I told a lot of people about a month and a half ago, probably sometime mid-November, that I felt like this was the year for Notre Dame to figure things out, get on track, and win the national championship. I felt like they were just like Purdue was in basketball last year, where Purdue made it last year. They were a very high seed, and a lot of people counted them out because typically during the tournament in March Madness, they found ways to lose. They always found a way to lose over the years. But last year, Purdue found a way to figure it out. Zach Edey obviously had a ridiculous season, and he finishes his college career with a national championship. And I felt the same way it was going to be this year. It was going to be the same way this year for Notre Dame. I just felt like they were going to figure it out and win the national championship. I know they've had a lot of chances in the past, and it seems like every single time they get in the CFP, they always found a way to lose against a bigger team, a team that was stronger and bigger and quicker. But Notre Dame has always been a historic program. I know I went to BC. I know I'm a lifelong BC football fan, but I've always respected the Notre Dame program because of how much it's meant for the history of college football. And I think one of my favorite movies of all time is Rudy, so that's a big reason I'm a big fan of Notre Dame. And it's obviously a big time program. So when I say, the teams that beat them were bigger, I don't mean it was a bigger program. Historically, Notre Dame is one of, if not the biggest program in the country. But when I look at it, they would always play teams that were stronger and quicker and faster, and they'd play smarter football. But that's not the case with Notre Dame this season. They're playing smart football, which they did almost find a way to lose multiple times last night. But at the same time, they responded and found ways to win, getting a late interception from Drew Aller late in that game, setting up a game-winning field goal. And Marcus Freeman is a very likable coach. He really is. And that was another reason I became a fan of this team. It's not just Freeman. I'm going to get into him in just a second. But I want to talk about Riley Leonard. Riley Leonard, I was a big fan of at Duke. Saw him play here against BC back in 2022. He had a great game. Duke came in here and just lit BC up for the most part, really just blew them out of the water. And when I saw Riley Leonard play, I saw a guy that could play both ways, running the ball and passing the ball, played very calm in the pocket, poised football, smart football, good arm, nice touch on his passes, and very good speed when he was running. But then when you saw him play at Notre Dame, it looked like a different quarterback. Seems like he didn't always play confident, was thinking more than he should, was running too much more than he should. He should have been, focusing on staying in the pocket and throwing more, maybe throwing more in the run rather than trying to scramble and fight for an extra yard. And that's one thing you can't take away from him. He plays like Daniel Jones. He's always going to fight for that extra yard. That's something that a lot of people do respect him for, is his ability to always fight for that extra yard. But Riley Leonard, I'm a big fan of, so I was a fan of that team heading into this season. And then Marcus Freeman, very likable coach, very smart guy, very young as well. And you could see he's building the program the right way, around guys that want to play football, that love the game, that are dedicated, that give it their all each and every play no matter the score. Think about this. This team lost early on in the season, and a lot of people counted them out. Everyone said, Notre Dame lost early on. I think it was week 2 they lost to Northern Illinois, and everybody was saying, Notre Dame's done. They're done. They lost. And you know what they did? They found a way to respond. Despite a loss to Northern Illinois 16-14 on September 7th, they responded and haven't lost a game since. They have not lost a game since. And do you know how many one-score games they've had since that day they lost to Northern Illinois? Only 2. They beat Louisville 31-24 on September 28th. And then they won last night 27-24 over Penn State by 3. So they have won each game since that loss against Northern Illinois. And in just about every single one of them, they've won by 2 possessions or more, which is very impressive. Now they're 14-1 in the season, and they're going to face the winner of Texas and Ohio State. I think Ohio State wins that game tonight. It should be a great game between Notre Dame and Ohio State if that's the matchup. Should be a great game between Texas and Notre Dame if that's the matchup too. But I think Notre Dame and Ohio State would be an awesome game to watch, and we'll see what happens there. But I'm going to give more of my thoughts on that game some point later in the weekend, maybe Monday of next week. I'll give my thoughts on that. I want to dive into the NFL playoff bracket really quick and give you my thoughts on that. And then I'm going to have to go, as I said, probably in about 10 minutes. So this will be a very quick episode. I didn't have anything prepared really coming in here. I just wanted to do a quick episode since I want to talk about the NFL playoffs before they began. So I'm going to do so right now. It's going to be very brief. Going to give a look into each matchup, but very quick. It won't be too much. And maybe if I have a minute tomorrow or later in the weekend, I'll try to give more in-depth thoughts on each of these games. So let's start off with the first game. And the first game is the Houston Texans will be hosting the Los Angeles Chargers. And I almost said that wrong the first time, but the Texans are the highest seed, so they will be hosting in this game. And here's how I feel about this one. The Chargers defense has been very good this season. That was a defense that had a lot of injuries last year, and they came in with a lot of question marks around this team. Do they trade Khalil Mack? Do they cut Khalil Mack? Do they trade Joey Bosa? And they said just, we'll keep both guys, find a way to make this work, and it worked. This season has been a great season for the Chargers. Justin Herbert has played excellent. Ladd McConkey's been a good addition to that lineup. I still think Herbert could use a wide receiver one. That could be something they solve in the draft this year or maybe in free agency. But they really built things well over the last year. Then you look at the Texans. They've had a disappointing season to some degree, and even though they're in the playoffs, it's disappointing compared to what they were last year. I think a lot of people expected them to take a step up, especially with the moves they made in the offseason. But Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs going down with season-ending injuries obviously was a tough note for them in the regular season. I like the Chargers in this game. I think they win that one. Then I'm going to go with the Ravens versus the Steelers as the next game. That is tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. So it will be the Ravens and the Steelers going at it tomorrow night in Baltimore at 8 p.m. I like the Ravens to win this one. I think the Steelers are still missing something on offense. Even though Russell Wilson's had a decent season, I still don't think you're going to really win a playoff game with him. I think he's obviously on the back end of his career, even though he's had a bounce-back season. At the end of the day, I'm not really going to stay with Russell Wilson and say he's going to be the answer that really brings them, a big playoff run. If I had the choice, I think maybe Justin Fields would be the guy I'd roll the dice with in this game, but obviously that's not going to be the case. Mike Tomlin is going to start the guy that started for most of the season, and that's Russell Wilson. I still think Russell Wilson is a good quarterback. I think he's impressed me the last couple seasons, but I still don't think you're going to make a playoff run with him. As for the Ravens, Lamar Jackson only has 2 playoff wins in his career, so there's a major question mark around his game, is whether or not he can win playoff games, and that's what it comes down to a lot of the time. People look at quarterbacks and grade them based on how much they're winning in the playoffs. So Lamar Jackson, if he can make a deep run this year, he would put away a lot of the criticism about his playoff performances in the past, and I'm hoping he does that this year. I think the Ravens have a lot of good players around Lamar Jackson, and I still think they could maybe add on offense. I still think they could add another wide receiver maybe, hopefully in free agency or the draft. Go out and add a legitimate wide receiver one. I know Zay Flowers was a Pro Bowler this year. That's BC's first Pro Bowl wide receiver ever, which is very impressive, and that's obviously great to see. And hopefully they get another wide receiver that complements Zay. If you look at the best receiving cores around the league, let's look at the Bengals, the Dolphins. They have 2 guys that are elite playmakers, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, Jamar Chase, and also T. Higgins. You look at the Rams, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua. It helps having 2 legitimate weapons, and hopefully that's something that the Ravens can do, is go out and get another weapon for Lamar Jackson in the offseason. I like the Ravens to win this game over the Steelers. Should be a good divisional matchup. The next game is the Bills hosting the Broncos. Not going to dive into this game too much since I don't have too much time, but I do think the Bills win that one. Josh Allen's had an excellent season. I still think Lamar Jackson probably should be MVP, and then Joe Burrow second, then Josh Allen third. Lamar Jackson's had a ridiculous season considering how good he's been. And the last 2 times he's won the MVP, and this year he's had even better numbers. I think Lamar has to be the MVP. But Allen's had a great season. The Bills have impressed me. I thought this was the Jets division. Obviously, I was wrong about that. Maybe it was wishful thinking since I'm always going to root for teams that Aaron Rodgers is on. And I obviously missed there. The Jets end up missing the playoffs as well. But I like the Bills to win this one. Bo Nix has been good this season. I'm still not completely, buying in on Bo Nix. I still think he's not as, great as a lot of people are talking. He's obviously had some good games, had some good passes, but I still don't know necessarily if he's the answer in Denver for the future. But hopefully he proves me wrong. Wishing him the best. I did like him in college, but I just didn't feel like he was really necessarily going to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. It's proved me wrong for the most part so far, but we'll see what happens in this game. I like the Bills to win that one over the Broncos. Next up, on January 13th, we got the Rams hosting the Vikings. I like the Vikings to win this one. I do like the Rams a lot. Love Sean McVay. I think he's the best coach in the NFL. And then I do like some of their receivers as well. Puka Nacua is great, and Cooper Kupp as well. And Kyron Williams is a guy I've been a fan of for the last few seasons too. But I think the Vikings have a better team. I think if you look at this Vikings squad, Kevin O'Connell is a great coach, just like Sean McVay. He's gotten the most out of Sam Darnold. I'm rooting for Sam Darnold to do well. Also, Daniel Jones is a backup quarterback there, so I'm going to root for whatever team Daniel Jones is on. So I like the Vikings to win that one. Although the Rams are a sneaky team, if they win that one, I think they are capable of beating the Lions, if that ends up being their matchup in the next round. Next up, we have the Bucs versus the Commanders. I'm going to take the Bucs in this one. I think the Commanders have had a good season, but they could have lost a lot of these one-score games. Once to the Bears, could have lost twice to the Giants potentially. So I still haven't fully bought in on the Commanders being, a legitimate contender in the NFC. Have they had a very good season, and do they deserve to be in the playoffs? Definitely. They've had a great year and obviously surprised a lot of people, including myself. Jaden Daniels has been excellent this year for them as a rookie quarterback. And obviously a guy like Terry McLaurin, who I've been a fan of now for the last 4 or 5 seasons, he's been awesome to watch with him too. But I do think the Bucs are the better team here. I think Baker Mayfield, the way he's played the last couple of years, has just been fearless football, and I think he's built for the playoffs. He has been a quarterback that was criticized for a lot of his career, especially in Cleveland. Ends up going to Carolina. That didn't work out. Goes to the Rams for a little bit at the end of that season that he was in Carolina. That ended up not working out, and then he ends up going to Tampa Bay, and he ends up finding a home there. And he's found a way to win games. I think he's a perfect playoff quarterback because he's a gamer. Doesn't matter what the score is. Doesn't matter what the situation is. Baker Mayfield's always going to put himself on the line to try to make a play. And even though I do think he plays a little bit cocky at times, and I don't really always love the attitude and the swagger he brings, since I think it comes off as too much at times, he's still a good quarterback. He's proven me wrong over the last couple seasons. I like the Bucs in this one over the Commanders. And then we have the Eagles and the Packers. And I'm going to go with a big upset here. I think Green Bay is the team that can surprise a lot of people in the NFC. They were my team that I thought would win the Super Bowl before the season began. I don't think I ended up recording, a Super Bowl prediction before the year began, but all year long, I thought Green Bay was going to find a way to win it. Even when Jordan Love went down early on, I felt like he'd be back in the playoffs for them to make a potential run. I know they've had their issues. I know Christian Watson's going to be out. Jair Alexander has been battling injuries as well, and he could potentially be out for the year if I remember right. So they are having some issues with injuries, but I do think this team is a squad that nobody really wants to necessarily play in the playoffs because they do have those guys that can make big-time plays in big-time moments, like Jaden Reed, like Romeo Doubs, like Josh Jacobs. Those are just some players that can make plays in big moments. Jordan Love finished the second half of the season very well for the most part. I expect him to have a good game against the Eagles on January 12th. That game's a 4:30 p.m. kickoff. The Eagles have been great this season. I can't really say too much about them that's on the negative side. I think they have a great football team all around. I loved what they did in the draft this year. Cooper DeJean was very underrated. I honestly thought Quinyon Mitchell was an excellent pick for them. I know a lot of people didn't really know too much about him coming out of Toledo when they drafted him in the first round of this year's draft back in 2024. But I think when you watch him play, just brings a lot of intensity to the game of football. Always playing smart football as well, in the right position, making plays. I love the way Quinyon Mitchell plays, always going to give you his best effort. So I think it's going to be a good game. I think Jalen Hurts has to step up in this one. I think when I've watched him play this season, I haven't seen the exact stock quarterback that a lot of people expect Jalen Hurts to be, which is a very good quarterback, but when people put him in the top 5, top 7 quarterbacks in the NFL, I haven't necessarily seen that all season long. Obviously, they relied on that run game a lot. Saquon Barkley had a ridiculous season, just shy of the NFL rushing record for a single season, which was very, very impressive. Tough to see as a Giants fan, but the reality was he wasn't going to do that for the New York Giants, considering our offensive line and our offense. But I do think this team, the Eagles, one of the best all-around teams in football, and obviously look at the receiving, the receivers who are great, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert, and then you look at the running back, Saquon Barkley. There is a lot of talent on this team, but I think the Green Bay Packers can upset them. I do expect Jordan Love to have a big game, and hopefully that Packers defense, which has shown up at times this season, and had some big, big moments, hopefully they can do that in that game tomorrow, or I should say actually on Sunday. That's when that game will be at 4:30. So I do think the Packers win that one and surprise the Philadelphia Eagles. Next up, and this will be the divisional round, we would have the Chiefs and the Chargers. I think the Chiefs win that one. They always find a way to win, although I think the Chargers will be in that game. Would not be surprised if the Chargers do upset them there. I'm rooting for the Chargers to make a big run. One of my really good friends, who's a podcaster as well, ClipCase74, is a big Chargers fan. Check him out on YouTube. He actually has a lot of episodes up about the NBA, talks some football as well and baseball. Really big sports fan, knows a lot about sports, and he's a big Chargers fan, so I'm rooting for the Chargers to make a run for him. Also, my friend Jack Natoli is a Chargers fan as well, so I'd root for them to make a run for both of those guys, and hopefully this is their chance. I know they've never won the Super Bowl before, and I always root for teams that have never won before. That's just something that's always awesome to watch. This team is a team that's never won before, make a run and win it all. So I'm rooting for the Chargers to do well, but I think it might be a tough game against the Chiefs. The Chiefs always just seem to get their calls and everything that goes their way at Arrowhead Field. So I think the Chiefs win that one, but I think it'll be close. We'll see how things change. Maybe when that game comes around, if the Chargers do win this weekend and they end up playing the Chiefs, maybe I'll have a different thought heading into that divisional game. But I think the Chiefs win that as of now. As I said, I'll be rooting for the Chargers, though. I think it'll be a close one. Next up, we'd have the Bills versus the Ravens. I like the Ravens in that one. I think Lamar Jackson has what it takes to make a deep run in the playoffs this season. As I said, I know that's something that people criticized him for in the past. But I think Lamar Jackson can silence a lot of those critics this year with a deep playoff run. If he beats Josh Allen, especially at Buffalo, in a big game, obviously it would be a great statement for Lamar Jackson in his career. So hopefully he ends up doing that. As I said, I think it would be a great statement for his career to go in and beat Josh Allen in Buffalo. So I got the Ravens winning that one over the Bills. Next up, we would have the Lions and the Packers. Honestly, the Lions are probably the better team, but I think the Packers are a scrappy team. And as I said, I liked them before the season began, so I'm just going to roll with them winning that one yet again. Next up, we would have the Buccaneers and the Vikings. I'm going to roll with the Vikings here. I think that would be a really good game, though, Buccaneers-Vikings. I think the Vikings have what it takes, though. As I said, Sam Darnold has played confident all year long. The second half of the season has been awesome to watch. He's a guy I've always been a fan of. I've always been a big fan of his talent and felt like he wasn't always used properly, and now you see him in a quarterback-friendly system with Kevin O'Connell making big-time plays. And I think the Vikings defense, especially their run defense, would be very, very good in that game, put pressure on those running backs in Tampa Bay, and would end up forcing Baker Mayfield to throw, which Baker Mayfield can throw. But if you take away the run game, every single quarterback in the NFL will definitely change their mindset and the way they play, depending on if their run game, is non-existent. If you shut down a quarterback's run game, it puts a lot of pressure on them in the pass game at the end of the day. So I think the Vikings defensive line could put pressure on that Tampa Bay running game, and that would end up obviously maybe hurting the pass game for Tampa Bay. So I'm going to roll with the Vikings winning that one. Next up, we would have the conference championship, Chiefs versus Ravens. I think the Ravens win that one, and then it would be the Packers versus the Vikings. And as I said, I've rolled with the Packers all season. Going to roll with them yet again. So it would be the Packers versus the Ravens in the Super Bowl on February 9th in New Orleans. And I would pick the Packers to win it all. At the end of the day, I could be completely wrong, and this might be wishful thinking since I've rooted for them all season long. Very young team, but they play football very tough. Obviously, they have Jeff Hafley, former BC head coach. There is their defensive coordinator. Have other BC players as well, including A.J. Dillon and Isaiah McDuffie. So they're an interesting squad. I think they're definitely a scrappy team nobody wants to play. I think they have what it takes to potentially make a deep run, and I've rooted for them all season long, so I'm going to stay with them. But if I didn't make any predictions before the season began, I honestly think as of right now, the two best teams in the NFL, and I'm going to go one on each side, I would still side with the Ravens being the best team in the NFL. When they are locked in and their offense is clicking, they're very hard to beat, especially considering Lamar Jackson's running ability and how great Derrick Henry's been this year for them as well. Rashad Bateman has stepped up in big-time moments as well for them, has been great in the second half of the year. So I would say the Ravens are the best team in the AFC. In the NFC, probably the Lions. The Lions are a very good team. As I said, they're probably the best team in the NFC. But as I said, I'm going to roll with the Packers to make a run there. But if I didn't make any predictions before the season began, my prediction right now would probably be Lions versus the Ravens, and I would probably take the Ravens to win the Super Bowl. But as of right now, for fun on this podcast right now, the way I see it, before the season began, I had a feeling that the Packers would make a deep run, just like I thought maybe Notre Dame would make a deep run this year. So I'm going to stay with those predictions, and we'll see what happens. Could be wrong, and that's the fun in sports is at the end of the day, you're going to make predictions, and that's what having a podcast is all about. You talk sports. Some things you're going to be right about, some things you're going to be wrong about. That's the beauty of sports. You never know what's going to happen until you let things play out. Anyways, that'll wrap up this episode. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to this. As always, I appreciate it. Hope you guys have a great weekend, and I'll see you guys soon here in the WZBC studio. Hopefully, I'll be back on here sometime next week, and I probably will record something over the weekend if I get a second. Do have a busy weekend, but if I do get a moment, I will try to record something about college football and then maybe give some more updated predictions on the NFL games, since I really did just fly through that. Didn't give too much thought into each game, just kind of did that all on the fly, considering I didn't really have too much time today to look into the bracket. But we'll see how things play out. Thank you guys so much for listening. It is always a pleasure, and I hope you guys have a great weekend. Shout out to my family for listening to this. It is much appreciated. Love you guys. I hope you guys have a good one. Take care.